I'm Jean Kelcher, and I'm with the Wisconsin Council of the Blind and Visually Impaired. Want to welcome you all to Birding by Ear. This is our 4th year doing this, our 2nd year that we're doing it virtually. So just to say a few words about the council. The council's mission is to promote the dignity and empowerment of people in Wisconsin who are blind and visually impaired. We do this in 3 ways. We do a lot of advocacy, and right now, a lot of busy advocacy around legislative issues. We provide vision services, and we've been out and about doing vision services since last fall, as long as people are comfortable having us come into their home. And then we also provide education programs. And so we've been doing a lot of virtual programs, and we are just starting to see things open up a little bit in the Madison area for other kinds of programming. Okay, so I'll turn it over to Brenna, who will say a little bit about Audubon.
Great, thanks. Nice to have you all here today. My name is Brenna Marcichek. I'm the Director of Communications and Outreach with Madison Audubon. We are a chapter of National Audubon, but a separate organization. So we work in 10 counties in South Central Wisconsin doing bird conservation work. So we do that mostly through habitat restoration. We have about 2,000 acres that we own and have restored to native habitat. We do a lot of youth education, normally in schools and community centers. Now it's all virtual. We also have a bunch of citizen science programs, and I recognize a few of you from some of those. And we host a number of classes each spring, and this is one of our favorite classes that we partner with the council on. We also offer like a birding 101 and a nature art class and that type of thing. So it's nice to see you all here, and if you have any questions, just let me know. I'd be happy to chat.
Okay, thanks, Brenna. So our speakers today, we'll start, or people helping with our activity groups. Lynn.
Good morning, everybody. Lynn Welch here from the Council of the Blind. I am the Communications Director in the interim, and looking forward to joining you today.
Okay, and one of our speakers, Jim.
Good morning and happy May Day. I am Jim Denham. I am the Access Technology Specialist with the Council, and I live in Fitchburg. Happy to have everybody here this morning on a beautiful Saturday morning.
Okay, and then Carrie. Carrie has been with this program since the beginning because it was his idea. Has worked very long and hard on making this a really good program. We appreciate all that effort. So Carrie.
Thanks, Jean. Yeah, hi everybody. Good morning. I live in Madison and an avid birder and biologist in past life mostly, and just excited to have this program in our 4th year.
And Carrie was up at 7:30 and outside looking at birds this morning.
Not very successfully, but
but out and about. All righty. So I think that takes care of introduction. So Carrie, if I'll let you take over.
Ready. Here we are again. I know a number of you have been here before. Some of you I recognize, and it's great to have you back, and it's great to have newcomers as well. We're excited that this is our 4th year, and I don't think, even if you've done it before, it will be too redundant. We have some new species for you, and it's a different time of year. So we're a little earlier than normal, and this is peak migration right now. So a little bit, hopefully it'll really pick up in the next couple of weeks, but we're in the middle of it. Today, the goals for the program are threefold. They're general goals. Obviously, we'll have more specifics later, but we really, part of it is to introduce people to birding that haven't birded before or have just seen a few birds in their backyard but haven't really focused too much on them. And it's a very popular pastime. It's getting more popular in the US and around the world. You may have heard of eBird, which is something where you can list all the birds you've seen And that's being used all over the world to document bird populations and when they're breeding and all kinds of great stuff. Lots of photos and audio. It's worth checking out, signing up and checking out. It's a great tool. Secondly, and maybe the most practical skills you'll get are learning to identify birds by song, by call, and other non-visual cues. Finally, we just want to inspire people to be sort of better stewards, more passionate stewards and champions for conservation of our Earth and our habitats and the birds and other animals that live in them. And plants, let's not forget plants. And I want to emphasize that especially it's easy to kind of think about trying to learn all the different species we hear and being able to identify them by species. But I would really emphasize that you want to mostly focus on learning skills to identify the birds, breaking down the sounds in sort of bits and pieces, figuring out what makes a sound different from other sounds, and ways to commit these sounds to memory. So again, don't worry so much about what species you're learning today. That'll come with practice, but really this is about learning how to identify sounds and separate them. So birders often talk about their spark birds, the bird that got them really interested in birds and birding. And I have one that I heard when I was in school, and it was out west, and this is a hummingbird called the Allen's hummingbird. It's really local to the West Coast, and it was displaying, and they make this crazy sound with their tail feathers when they display, when it's during courtship. And let's play a little bit of that. Was that audible to everybody?
Yep.
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
So great, thank you. The tail feathers are making most of that sound, and the wing feathers. That buzzing and rattling sound is almost all wind going through the tails as they sort of shake it and open and close the feathers. And then they do a crazy thing at the end that's not on the video, on the audio, where they go up into the top. They go like 100 feet in the air, and then they dive down and make this really interesting sort of metallic ripping sound. So that really got me into birds. And then Jim is going to tell you about his spark bird.
Sure. So I was actually born in northern Wisconsin. I spent a lot of time up there as a kid, and also very involved in Boy Scouts. And we took a lot of trips up there as well. So a lot of fishing trips and canoe trips out in the lakes and the rivers at night. And I remember early on just hearing this bird, and it's a sound that will to me, it just touches your soul. It's so just kind of haunting, but yet it just really connects you with nature, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful sound. And it's just amazing to me that a fairly small bird can make this big of a sound. And it's really the sound that really got me interested in birding, and really kind of got me thinking about birds and bird calls and bird songs and other different things. So it is the sound of the loon. So go ahead and we'll go ahead and hear that real quick. And you can hear the waves in the background, and you can hear kind of the water in the background. So just a really peaceful sound, but kind of just a awe-inspiring sound as well. So just one of those sounds that just really got me fascinated, the fact that an animal can make this type of noise. So an amazing thing. So that really got me interested in the hobby.
Thank you, Jim. And I wish we could hear more of them down here in this part of the state, but I'm sure some of you live north of us in Madison, hear them more regularly, and you're pretty lucky. All right, so this might not be necessarily obvious to a lot of people, but the best birders are definitely the best listeners. The people that can break down the sounds, separate them, and identify the birds by sound are often, almost always, the best birders I know, and in general, it's sort of common knowledge. Especially when you're working with or you're birding forests and upland areas, as opposed to waterways and lakes and things like that. You almost always hear birds before you ever see them. And sometimes, even if you see them, you can't get a very good look at them because they're up in the top of trees. But the sounds, the songs and calls are the best ways to identify these birds. So speaking of listening, we're going to listen to a bit of a dawn chorus, which is sort of the early morning singing that birds do often in the early spring and summer. And it can be really magical to wake up right about dawn, a little before dawn, and listen to what's happening outside. So we'll listen to an audio file that was recorded up in Minocqua in June, I think it was. And what I want you to do is just listen and try to just make in your head or write down how many different species you think you're hearing, how many different sounds, separate sounds you think you're hearing from birds here. We'll play about a minute of it or so. Later. Okay. So what I want you to do is open up your chat window and just type in how many species you think you heard, how many different birds you think you heard. So we'll give you about 15 seconds to do that. Alt-H will get you to the chat window. Let's see here. I'm having trouble getting to my chat window. Okay, there it is. Let's see what we got here. Somebody said sapsucker. There was a sapsucker. All right, I'm seeing 13.5. I like that. 8, 7, 15 to 20, 12, 14, 10, 24, 12, 7 plus. Yeah, I mean, this is great. I mean, I'm seeing sort of exactly what I got. I think I got about 12, 13 this time. So that's impressive, especially if this is new to you, to be able to separate the sounds like that already. You're on your way. You're totally on your way. So this recording, according to the person who put it online, had 29 species. Now it's over an hour long, so we probably didn't hear everything that is audible. You listen to the whole thing. The link is available in the resource list that we sent you. So it's fun to just kind of turn it on and listen in the background. It's just a gorgeous recording. But you can see on this slide that there's a good number of species. Some people listed some of them. I know I noted the common loon, the least flycatcher. There was a red yellow-bellied sapsucker drumming, song sparrow, an oriole, crow, and then I'm sure people picked up on the loon in the background. There's just all kinds of stuff. And I'm very impressed at how many people were able to break down that number of species. That's really cool. So a couple things to remember when you're out birding. It's really critical to really keep in mind and know where you are. So know what kind of habitat you're in, what part of the country you're in. Are you in a meadow? Are you along a stream? Are you in a forest, a dense forest? Are you in sort of a secondary open forest? These things will all help you narrow down the list of potential bird species that are there. And that will make it a lot easier to kind of come up with a good identification in the end. But the other thing to remember is the time of year, especially. So right now, as I mentioned, we're really about to hit peak migration for this part of the country. And a lot of birds are starting to move into our area, and they'll eventually, a lot of them will pass by us and go further north. But that can be overwhelming if you have just so many species that you only see a couple months out of the year. Once you get into midsummer, then we have all the residential breeders. So they'll be around most of the summer, and they'll be a little easier to learn. You get into winter and you get a whole nother group of birds. So keep those things in mind, and it'll just make it that much easier to identify them. And of course, a lot of the guides will tell you when and where birds are expected to be. So why are these birds making all these vocalizations and non-vocal sounds? Well, the main things are marking and defending their territories, attracting mates, of course, in the summer, in the breeding season, and just basic communication and coordination with other birds and potentially other species, other animals. A lot of the basic communication is trying to figure out where each other are, especially with mated pairs and family units. If you see certain birds, especially after young have fledged, foraging together, often you'll hear just little slight chip notes that they're making, and that's generally just kind of contact calls, so that people let them know where everybody is. And it also may help in determining, in just letting others know if it's safe. You'll hear birds give out alarm calls if there's predators in the area. You've probably heard jays and chickadees do that when you approach, or when they see a dog or something like that, a cat. Young will make calls, certain calls if they're hungry. They'll scold other birds, scold other animals, all kinds of things. And then there's incidental sounds that are not necessarily intentional, just the sounds of their wings when they're flying, or the scratching when they're looking for food on the ground, things like that. And we'll use the term songs and calls a lot. And I'll just talk about what the difference is here. Calls tend to be produced by both males and females and heard all year round. They're not necessarily associated with any breeding behavior. They're a little more random, less tonal. They don't necessarily have pure tones like songs often do. Let's listen to a couple examples of familiar birds. The American crow makes a number of calls. This is one you're probably familiar with here. Listen for the fact that it's a little, this one's maybe a little easier to hear, this robin that I'm about to play. Try to listen for the fact that these calls are a little hard to predict. The randomness of it, the pattern is a little hard to predict. They're not necessarily in any kind of particular rhythm or pattern. So that's a good way to sort of identify a call. Let's listen to the robin now. So the rhythm in that call is not quite consistent. Again, it doesn't follow a familiar rhythm or pattern that songs often do. let's then hear an example of a song. So these vocalizations tend to be produced by males, and it's usually to attract mates or defend territories, or define territories. Sometimes they'll move around the edges of their territory and sing. And then in most species, it's limited just to the breeding season. So here in Wisconsin, that's really just May through August, essentially. But sometimes you'll hear birds sing in the winter too. So it's not always that sometimes it'll happen. It's just, it's much more limited, and it may be one or two repetitions of it. So let's hear the Northern Cardinal song here. So think of this compared to the calls we just heard. There's a tonal quality, there's a rhythmic quality. You can predict sort of how the sound is how the sound's proceeding, at least the phrases, the separate phrases. There's not as much random pattern. Let's listen to the Cardinal Call as a comparison here. Again, it's a little more random. It's just a single sort of non-tonal chip note. It can be heard all year round. You'll hear cardinals doing this in the winter, in the fall, in the spring, all kinds of stuff. So this is more of a contact call that they're making to communicate with their mate or with their young and things like that. All right, so we're now going to play a song or a call. And what we want you to do is just, I'll play the song or the call, and I'll want you to enter in your chat window, whether you think it's one or the other, a song or a call. So here we go. Okay, so go ahead and enter in your chat window whether you think that's a song or a call. So I'm seeing everybody has said call. There is not a single person who got that wrong. That's fantastic. And somebody actually identified the bird as the white-breasted. And that is correct. White-breasted nuthatch. Tiny bird about the size of a little pill bottle. They're very acrobatic. They run around the trunks and branches of trees with a little probing bill, needle sharp bill that they use to stick into crevices and pry out grubs and other insects. They're very, very cool birds. And there's about 3 species, I believe, in North America. So we have the white-breasted mostly. Sometimes we'll get the red-breasted, but they're more found in conifer forests. Okay, and then the third category of sounds are the non-vocal sounds. So these can function occasionally like calls and songs, excuse me, but they're going to involve wing whirs, wing whistles, wing drumming, tail pops, hammering or drumming on wood, bill snaps, etc. So again, all sounds that are produced by anything but the vocal cords. So let's listen first to a familiar bird, the mourning dove. When it takes off from the ground or a perch, it sounds like this. And that is just the wind through the outer wing feathers that's happening as it takes off, and they're kind of snapping together also. And that's a good way to identify a mourning dove, really. We have the mourning dove and we have the rock pigeon in the area, but the mourning dove's wings are very distinctive when it takes off. And you don't have to see this bird to identify it as a mourning dove. So that's a good way to do so. Then the other really cool one that's in the area right now and is does a really interesting display in April usually, where it goes up into the air and sort of spirals down. And this is a courtship display. And as it does so, this is American woodcock. This is a type of shorebird. They're maybe, how big are they? They're about the size of a crow maybe, but a lot more compact. They're kind of round. So they're maybe 8 inches long or something like that. But they have a long bill, like a 2 or 3 inch bill. And they use it to probe into the dirt for worms and other stuff to eat. And when they go and do their courtship display, they sound like this. So the sort of high twittering, the fast twittering is wind moving through the outer wing feathers, sort of like the mourning dove, but it's much more intentional. It's probably spreading them out a little bit or bringing them together to kind of create these sounds as it flies. And the chirp-like sound is, I believe that's a vocalization, but what we're really listening to is that twittering sound. And again, that's all non-vocal. The final thing that you might hear, or the example that I'll give here, is a bill snap sound. And this sometimes you'll hear, especially with flycatchers, which are small birds that eat flying insects. So they'll fly after flying insects and sort of snap them up. And sometimes you'll hear their bills as they're snapping shut on an insect. But other times they might be kind of aggressive to other birds, and you'll hear something like this. And you might have to turn your volume up a little bit. I'll play it again here. So that's an eastern phoebe snapping its bill, probably in sort of an aggressive way towards another bird. Okay, any questions so far?
Okay, Evelyn, did you have a question?
Yes, my question is do you have my audio on?
Yes.
Okay, I wasn't sure if it was on because it's fire engines. The cardinals I hear around here actually sound like they're saying pretty, 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 and I didn't hear that in what you played earlier. Is that a different call or something?
Yeah, that's actually a good way of describing the cardinal song. I've heard that. It's like purdy, 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 purdy. And that's part of the song. Sometimes the songs can be a little more, they can have different phrases, different types of sounds. So I think the one I played had a couple different sounds, but purdy, purdy, purdy was part of it. Sometimes you'll hear it go like.
Yes, yes.
So you'll hear like two parts. But yeah, that's great. And they in different parts of the country, they'll have slightly different songs, even probably different parts of the state and maybe even city. You'll find different dialects a lot of times with birds in different areas. And I didn't mention, but songs are often learned. There's often, they think there's a basic template of the song that the bird is born with, but then they have to kind of learn the nuances of it from their father at some point when they're being raised and listening to other males sing. And I should also mention that there's a lot more research being done on female song. The cardinal in particular, the female sings pretty regularly, although it's not as complicated or long as the male song, but it can sound very similar. And, it's definitely easy to get fooled by thinking it's a male when it's actually a female singing.
Okay. Any other questions?
I always love to hear the cardinals first thing in the very, very early spring. You know, it's like spring's coming. The cardinals are singing.
Yeah, they sing pretty early, don't they? Chickadees and cardinals seem to get in on it right away. Yeah, they're wonderful birds. I think my understanding is they, you know, many years ago, I mean, for us, for humans, like maybe last century, they weren't so present all year round in this part of the country that they more short distance migrants. They would go south for the winter, and we didn't see them until spring. But I think as things have changed, and feeders became more popular, they've stuck around for the winter, almost exclusively in our area now. So a couple tips for when you're listening. I've mentioned them when I talked about the songs, especially, is listen for these qualities of sound: the rhythm, the pitch. So that's actually the note or the tone, the timbre or the quality of the sound. So you might have a note that's a middle C, but one is very pure and the other is really rough, something like that. So the timbre can really help define and help you identify the different sounds and different species. And then also any kind of repetition or the pattern that's discernible when you listen to these things. There's a whole bunch of mnemonic phrases. So mnemonics are just memory devices. And for birders, often they come in the form of these phrases, and they're often English words or they're nonsense words. And if you're just starting to birding and you hear someone say, "Oh, that cardinal said cheeseburger," and you're like, "No, it did not. It didn't say anything close to cheeseburger." But the pattern is there and the emphasis is there, and as you associate that word with the sound, it just makes it easier for your brain to remember it. So that's what those are all about, and they can be really useful. I find they can be very helpful. We have a whole list that will link to a whole list of them. So that's something I hope you take a look at later. Timbre, as I mentioned, can be real, just, you know, it can just be the quality of roughness or buzziness to a note. So I'll play a couple examples just to give you a sense of how that might differ. Here's a robin song here first. And they kind of like cheery up, cheerio, cheery up, cheerio. That's how that mnemonic phrase is usually portrayed. But I want you to listen. In the robin's case, there's a bit of a fluty quality to it. It's a little more multi-noted. And then we're going to listen to something that's quite similar, but listen for a more pure pinched note on the rose-breasted grosbeak song. No, the robin. Sorry, somehow that played the robin. Here's the grosbeak. So does that hopefully that makes sense. It's pretty subtle in some ways, but there's a real fluty quality, multiple notes being sung at the same time, which is something robins and other thrushes can do, compared to, and we'll listen to robin quickly. A little louder. It's a little, the notes are a little tighter, a little pinched, a little more pure. So that's a good example of timbre differences. So these mnemonics that I mentioned, as I said, can be phrases, English phrases, or nonsense words, and we'll listen to a couple versions. The first one is, I do love spring of the year, and that's what they say the eastern meadowlark sounds like. So we'll listen to the eastern meadowlark, which is a grassland bird. So I do love spring of the year. And then the another example of more of a nonsense phrase mnemonic is the blue-winged warbler song, which says, bee buzz. And other people have described that as a raspy inhaling and exhaling. You can sort of hear that. I do want to mention too that you don't necessarily, mnemonics don't necessarily have to be these phrases. Like I associate the eastern meadowlark with being out in a meadow in a sunny field with sun on my back, or just being in this hot sun, because in part because my professor said that when he was helping us learn this song. He said he always thinks, when he hears this song, he always thinks of the sun on the back of his neck. Being in a meadow, and he put his hand on the back of his neck, and I have this memory now every time I hear the eastern meadowlark of my professor putting his hand on the back of his neck and also just being out in the hot sun. So I have these sort of internal memories that associate with the eastern meadowlark song that have always stuck with me. So there's these, they're just great tools. Again, just finding these personal connections to bird songs really will help you remember them in the future. Okay, so we are scheduled next to do our group listening activity. How are we doing on time here? So what we're going to do is we're going to break into four breakout rooms, and you'll have 6 sounds for each group, and some of them are songs, some of them are calls, some of them are non-vocal, and you'll listen to the sound. You'll discuss the questions that are provided on that sheet we sent out with your group, and have about 25 to 30 minutes to do so. And then we'll come back after a short break, and we'll do a group feedback where you'll discuss a couple of the species that you were able to sort of, you thought were cool, and maybe why they were interesting, or what made them distinct. And remember, these questions are on this handout that we gave out. What is it? What do the sounds remind you of? What are the rhythm, pitch, timbre, and pattern? Song, call, or non-vocal. Try to figure out how big you think the bird is. And then the identification of the bird is much less important. I would really focus more on what these sounds, how you're able to describe the sound, what they remind you of. Maybe you can come up with your own mnemonic phrase, things like that. So yeah. We ready to do this? I'm group 4, and let's see. Did any of we didn't quite get to deciding who would talk. Does anyone want to be the presenter in our group here? Steve or Jenny?
Okay.
Jenny, you want to talk? Excellent.
Sure, I'll talk.
Okay.
So we went through several birds and learned the difference between the whether it was a song or a call, and we were able to either take on a mnemonic that it already had, or kind of create our own. And we came up with some pretty good ones. We decided, well, the chestnut-sided warbler was the please, please, please to meet ya. You know, so we figured out how either they were ending high at the end or lower at the end. whereas that one kind of pleased to meet you kind of was more of a low end, whereas the black-throated green warbler was we created a time to come to dinner now kind of thing. And so we were trying to come up with patterns and words to kind of match.
Why don't I play them both quickly so people can hear them? Here's the chestnut sided. Pleased to meet you, right? And then the, oops, lost it. And then the other one, the black-throated green. What was your mnemonic again, Jenny, for that one?
That one was time to come to, oh, the black-throated one?
Yeah.
Oh, that was the time to come to dinner now?
Yeah. Which I like. And then maybe talk about how you describe the field sparrow.
Oh. So back in the day, there was a TV show called Xena Warrior Princess, and before Xena, she did a war cry, and it was yeah, before she kind of went in, and so that sounded to me a little bit like the field sparrow at the end.
Here we go. So there's Xena, the Xena bird.
Xena Warrior Princess.
Yep. Which I love. And a lot of people think of that as also, they think of a ping pong ball. I've heard people describe that as dropping on a table. Jean, are we out of time basically? Should we?
You have a minute if you want to use it.
Another minute? Okay, Jenny, is there another one you want to talk about?
Well, we talked about the grouse, which was not a call or a song, but it was just a noise that it makes, and it sort of sounded like a flat tire going downhill.
Which I love. Let's listen to that. This is the ruffed grouse here. There's your flat tire driving down a hill. So every time you're in the forest and you hear a flat tire driving down a hill, you know you've heard a ruffed grouse doing its courtship display. That or somebody's driving through the forest with a flat tire.
Right.
Which hopefully they're not. Okay, thank you, Jenny. We'll move on.
So Jim is next.
Okay, so we had group number 3, and we had some great discussion, and I think Eileen is going to lead us in the recanting of that discussion.
Thanks, Jim. Yes, we didn't decide which birds that we wanted to report out on, so I will just give a few thoughts from our discussion, and then everybody from the group feel free to jump in. So one thing that we realized is that with some of the more complicated songs, we were having trouble with coming up with a mnemonic right away. So, and that we were okay with that we'll either find one in a resource or connect it to something else. We also learned about that things can repeat, but not with the same rhythm. And so that gave us, it tricked us maybe once or twice, but we overcame that. And we did a really good job on being able to distinguish the two thrushes that, songs that we heard. So let's choose a couple of examples. Well, why don't we choose the first one? Yeah. Which we'll choose the first one.
You want to have a good mnemonic for it?
Yes, we do. And actually, we have the mnemonic for it, and then one of us had a mnemonic that was a different bird, but it was helpful to that person. And that was an important point that we came away with, that as long as it has meaning to you, that's what's going to help you remember. So
Okay.
yeah, Jim, if you could take the first one, please.
Sure.
So we recognize that, the timbre of this was, different than some other things that we had been listening to, that we could maybe hear a little of the wind in the trees, thought it was a bigger bird. For one person, it reminded them of the sound that a rooster makes, but it's not a rooster. And it is a barn owl. And the mnemonic is who cooks for you.
Somebody else thought it sounded like a mule.
That was me. To me, it sounds like a mule, but I don't know how helpful that is. And then does someone from the group want to pick another bird for us to talk about? Okay, well, it's a fun bird. It's a fun bird to say the name of. How about I do that one?
Sure.
All right, so that would be the fourth one.
Yep, I'll play it real quick.
So this was our example of a non-vocal sound. And with another bird, we actually were fooled and thought we heard a non-vocal sound, but it wasn't. But this was clearly a woodpecker. And what we had learned too is that the rhythms of woodpeckers are really what identifies them. And you have to kind of really concentrate on that. And this is a yellow belly sapsucker.
Very good, thank you. And I'll just go play real quick the one that was that kind of has the sound. You might think it's a non-verbal sound at the end. I'll go ahead and play the second one here real quick. Whoops, I think it's the wrong one. Never mind. Hold on one second here. Wrong bird. So we kind of talked about how that sound at the end might be, this is a wood thrush, a wood thrush song. We kind of sound like sound at the end might be a non-vocal sound. It kind of maybe sounds like a little wing flap there at the end, but that's actually a vocal sound.
So in my head, that's the faux wood, the faux wood thrush, because it fooled us.
Yeah, there you go. Great, thank you, Eileen. Really appreciate that.
Okay, thanks, Jim. So Lynn's group is next.
Group number 2 had a great time talking about all the birds that we heard. And we have 2 people who are going to report out on 2 specific species. I will turn it over to Gail first.
So our first bird was a killdeer, which is a bird I know. And we talked about whether it really sounds like killdeer or not. And I said, it's got to be killdeer, 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 not killdeer, killdeer, killdeer. It's fast. And various people had other things they thought it sounded more like. But it was fun to hear not only the killdeer, but the wind and, some background birds, because when you're really listening to a bird, you don't get to just isolate it into a little box and only hear it. So that's my little bitty report on the killdeer. You want to play killdeer, Lynn?
Yeah, I'll just add to that one of our group members thought toodalip, toodalip was what we were hearing. Let's listen. So that's the killdeer. anybody else from group 2 have anything to add on the killdeer? In my notes, I have, we identified it as a call, squeaky sounding, squeaky, and that we heard forest sounds as well. Now, Katie is going to talk about our next species that we heard.
What was it? Oh.
It was the
let's see.
The northern.
Oh, the northern parula is a bird that is in the forest. It does the song. It's a song, and it does sort of rise in pitch at the very end, but then it kind of does a short little note at the very end. But the trilling sounds very raspy. It's like and that's what the northern parula is.
I'll go ahead and play that one for you. So are we hearing buzzy bring, bring, bring? And, we also discussed in our group how the mnemonic can be tricky because what you hear, what I hear and what you hear may not match what, killdeer or killdeer. It may, what's important though is what you hear and what you're going to be able to remember and identify with. So anybody else in group 2 want to chime in on our activity? Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Lynn. So Brenna?
Our group had so much fun talking about these that I forgot to warn them that we were going to be reporting out. So surprise. Does anyone in our group want to talk about one of the birds that they enjoyed listening to and learning about?
I was the mad chirping.
Yeah.
The one that scared me actually was when we were discussing marsh in May, and we heard this wild, crazy laugh type vocalization, and we weren't sure whether it was a call or whatever it was. It ended up being a wing with the wind in through the wings of a Wilson snipe, which was very interesting, a long beaked snipe. And I'll have to add to this a little bit more, Brenna, because when I first arrived in Wisconsin as a permanent resident, they wanted to take me out snipe hunting. And that was a big joke back then, where you're supposed to take the guy out into the woods at night and hold a big bag and put a flashlight behind it, and the snipe will just come running into it.
Ooh.
Of course, I believed it, so I went.
Oh.
But that didn't work out. But I'm glad to hear there are snipes.
Yes, there are indeed. Okay, I'll play that sound for you.
If I heard that in the woods, I'd run.
So this is the air moving through the tail feathers of the snipe as it does its mating display. So it's a really cool, and it happens kind of at dusk. So it's kind of a spooky, unsettling noise, but very, very cool. Great. Thanks, Eva.
You're welcome.
Anyone else from our group want to share?
Oh, yes. The two of them impressed me was the blue-eyed Virio. Was one of the first ones we discussed, and the sound was more complicated, and was interesting.
So the first one that we listened to, Conrad?
Yes, the blue-eyed.
So this one's the red-eyed Virio. I'll play it for you. And
Yes.
then you could maybe describe what you were listening to.
I thought the sound was more complicated, and that was interesting.
Right. So then this was the second Virio that we listened to. So then that one was the, do you remember which? The blue eye or the blue-headed Virio, yeah. Yep.
Yes.
Do you want to share any more about that, Conrad? What you heard when you were listening to it?
Yeah, the higher note at the beginning, and then it dropped at the end, and just the sudden shift was interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great, thank you. Anyone else? Jean, do we have time?
1 minute.
Okay, does anyone else from our group want to share anything?
One of the other groups mentioned using those mnemonics, what you hear versus what I, and we had that discussion. I think it was with the blue-headed Virio, where Brenna gave us, some clue words to look for, and then we ended up hearing completely different things, but we were still able to connect with those mnemonics.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, how it's just not useful unless you connect with it, right? Like to be able to have a mnemonic is a really nice tool if it makes sense to you. So making your own is a good route.
Could we still throw in the rough laughter of you know what?
Oh, sure. Okay, really quick. One more.
Repetitious call. Rough laughter of the Cooper's hawk.
Yes, here we go.
Yes, that was one of the...
And he's
Do you want to share any more about it?
He's a buddy with the Wilson snipe, right?
Yeah, so kind of similar noises. So that one was the snipe.
I'd be running so fast out of those woods.
Yeah, and that one was the Cooper's hawk call. Yep. Very fun. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Brenna. We'll turn it back to Carrie.
We'll take maybe just a minute or two if there's anybody who has like a question of clarification or anything that they just didn't quite understand about what we've been talking about before we move on to Jim's presentation about bird songs and technology.
I have a quick question. So the Cooper's hawk, is that in our area? Because I mean, if we sit outside at night, it sounds like monkeys in the jungle. And now when you just played that, it was like, oh my gosh, maybe that's what we're hearing.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, they are in the area.
Okay.
I'm not sure that they vocalize much at night. I'm not sure what that would be.
Maybe it is monkeys in our jungle. I don't know.
So did you say, was it you, Jenny, who said you had a barred owl?
We do. I named
2 of them.
Yeah, we have 2 of them.
Yeah.
The male, I think it's the male only because, well, he sits in a pine tree right out in my front window, and my husband has gone out and picked up the owl pellets so we can see what he's eating. And then a week ago, he flew in with something in his claws, and then he flew over to another tree, and then a second owl came over. He gave the catch to that owl and then came back to his tree. So I don't know if it's a girlfriend, a wife, if they're having babies. I'm not really sure what that was about, but we have a couple of them, and we're super excited about it.
My wife doesn't like dead rodents for gifts.
Right. So yeah. He can keep the mouse population down all he wants.
Yeah. So I asked because the barred owl also makes a monkey. It's like called a monkey call.
Oh.
And
Okay.
especially if there's a pair, they could be calling to each other. We also we listened to the Pileated Woodpecker, which has it's very similar, but it's higher pitched. So
okay, we have Pileated here too.
You might have lots of monkeys in your jungle.
Okay. Okay.
There's our monkeys.
Yeah. Well, the barred owl, we've taken some really pretty cool pictures, and he seems pretty, I mean, he just hangs out, and we go over and look up at him and wave at him, and he just continues to come back. He's not here now, but he's there every other day, or comes back every couple days, or we see him in another tree, or we see the two of them together. So it's kind of fun. But yeah, that's cool. Maybe that's just them making more noises, or the Pileated woodpeckers.
Mm-hmm.
I just listened to on Merlin. I listened to a duet of the barred owl, and it sounded a lot like monkeys.
Okay,
cool.
That's
Awesome.
cool.
I haven't,
Yeah.
how about I share my screen? Do you mind, Carrie, if I share quick?
Yeah, I was trying to find it, but I wasn't able to.
Okay, let me see if I can play this quick.
Yeah, there you go.
It may not be this one.
That's the normal sound we hear.
Yeah. Let's try this one.
About birds.
Okay, in any case, they do make one sound that is more monkeyish.
Monkeyish, yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Cool. Well, let's see. I think we just want to pass it on to Jim.
Mm-hmm.
So as I mentioned earlier, I am the access technology specialist with the council. And you may think, well, what does technology have to do with birding? It's like kind of different, but not to mention that we're using technology to all get together today. But you really, technology can really enhance the hobby of birding, because there's really a lot you can do, as we just heard with some of the different websites and some other different stuff. So I wanted to kind of talk about how the intersection of technology and birding a little bit here. And the first thing we want to talk about is kind of the ethics of recorded sound in nature. So this is just something to be cautious of when you are working with recorded sounds, because of the internet and the really high quality recordings we have today, we can get some really, really great sounds of birds and some very realistic sounds of birds. But we want to be careful where we're playing these sounds, because these sounds can definitely trigger responses in birds. And so we don't want to do that. We want to just keep the sounds to ourselves and not trigger these responses in actual birds. A couple weeks ago, I was doing some audio editing for this session and helping to get some of the different bird calls and bird sounds together. And I had my window open. It was one of those nice days. It was in the 60s, and I had my window open, and I was playing some different sounds. And I think some of the birds outside kind of responded like, "Hey, what's going on in there? Is that some of our friends in there? What's happening in there?" So I said, I really should put on headphones. I'm not, making. It'd be like if I was walking down the street, somebody yelled, "Hey, there's $1 million over here. There's $1 million. If we come get your $1 million or free cheeseburgers." I'd go over for the free cheeseburgers, But that's the kind of thing, because when we play these calls and these songs, it might be the equivalent of somebody saying, free food over here. And that really can, expose them to predators, because maybe that brings them to an area that they wouldn't ordinarily be. So we really want to be cautious when we're playing these sounds. You can take them away from young, you can expose them to predators. So really one thing you want to really do whenever you're playing bird sounds, either, especially out and about, is really consider using headphones. And I find that does two things. First of all, it really, it minimizes the chances that the bird calls are going to be heard by actual birds. but also really helps me hear the calls better. We were talking in our group about some different background sounds and hearing the wind and hearing some of the different things. So when you listen to these different calls on these different websites, you know, wearing headphones really allows you to kind of hear the sound better. So, you know, consider using headphones, especially if you're out and about, or just listening to the bird call at home and then going out and hearing it later. Some locations actually prohibit playbacks. Some parks will actually prohibit you from playing back bird sounds when you're in their park. So you can't actually have a phone that plays recordings. So you may send that, and it's actually always illegal to play endangered species. If you're playing a sound of an endangered species, it's always illegal to play that sound out in nature. So just be cautious. Just something to think about if you are playing with different websites or different apps when you're out and about. You know, just put a headphone on, or, you know, listen to it at home. Just something to think about when you're out and about, you know, listening to these different bird calls. So with that being said, I want to highlight 2 quick websites and 2 apps, because everything's all about apps these days, that we can really enhance our ability to hear some of these different calls and learn about some of the different birds that we've been hearing about today. The first one is allaboutbirds.org. It's a great website. Lots of different species information, lots of different bird calls, recorded bird calls, information about habitats, where you might find a particular bird, what time of year you might see a particular bird or hear a particular bird. So really, it's a great website to check out. All the information on that website is totally free. And I will also add that both these websites and both these apps as well, for those of you using Access Technology, are fully accessible. I'm an Access Technology user myself, and I use both these websites and both these apps on a regular basis. So definitely something to think about when you're navigating around. These are fully accessible. So allaboutbirds.org, and all of these are listed in your resource list. You'll receive that resource document that lists the different websites and different things. So all these apps and all these websites are listed in that resource document as well. So don't worry about writing these down. The second one is birdsoftheworld.org. And this is a fascinating website. This is one that I just started recently working with in the last month or two. And it is, there's some information you can get for free. Other information does require a subscription. The subscription, I think you can get for $8 a month or $50 a year. But it really has just a really wide variety of calls and songs and non-vocal sounds, and just lots of great information. The other day I spent just probably about 2-3 hours just browsing the website, and just one of those things, you start reading about different things and finding different things. And you find some great calls and some great information on the website. It's really easy to navigate with a screen reader, and it's really a great source of information. So birdsoftheworld.org, so a great site. Another good place to kind of find information for bird songs is YouTube. If you just Google, that loon sound that we played earlier, I just Googled YouTube loon sounds, and I actually found 3 or 4 different entries. So, you can find different stuff on YouTube as well. So that's another just a free resource you can check out and find different things. So let's talk real briefly about 2 different apps. The first one is called Song Sleuth. And by the way, both these apps are available for both iPhone, iPad, and Android. So if you have an Android phone or Android tablet, you can use those as well. Or if you have an iPad or an iPhone, those are available for there as well. So Song Sleuth is an app that helps you, it records a clip of a song, and helps you identify what that song might be, what that bird might be. Gives you 3 different possible solutions, 3 different possible species of what that bird may be. So you can use the app to record a song. It works better with songs. Calls are a little more tricky because calls are so short. It does much better with songs. If you record a song, and then it can identify that and gives you possible solutions. So it does a couple different things. When you first run the app, it wants to know what location you're in, because obviously certain birds are native to certain areas. You're not going to find certain birds on the East Coast or West Coast or in the Midwest. So it wants to know kind of what states you're in. It also tries to determine what time of year it is, because there's certain birds that are going to be having different songs in the springtime versus the summertime versus the wintertime. So it tries to determine that as well. So but once you have that, you can tap the record button, and it records a couple seconds of the song, and then you tap the ID button, and it will analyze the song and come back and give you a couple different possible species of what that song might be. The other kind of cool thing about the app is once you record it, you can listen to your own recording. And again, do this with headphones, but you can listen to that recording, and then you can also listen to it. Say, okay, I think this might be a northern cardinal. And then it will play a couple different, here's what a northern cardinal might sound like. So you can like listen to their recordings and listen to that and say, okay, yeah, my recording sounds pretty similar to theirs. So this is probably a cardinal, or this is probably a grouse or whatever. You can listen to the different songs and different examples. So it's kind of a neat way to, here's what I recorded and here's what the other recordings sound like. So it's kind of a fun way to check that out as well. It is a free app. Definitely check it out. It's kind of a fun way to, it doesn't positive identify, but kind of gives you some idea. You say, I think this might be a robin. Okay, well, yeah, it's definitely a robin, because it identifies as a robin as well. So kind of helps give you some idea of what it might be. So it's kind of a fun app. The other app is called Larkwire, and Larkwire is a birding by ear game. So allows you to kind of listen to a bird and identify what it might be, and gives you some hints, gives you some clues. So it's kind of just a fun game to play. I've spent a couple hours, wasting time with this one as well. Not wasting time, but it's Lark, Larkwire, and it's available from the Apple App Store or the Android Play Store. And just kind of a fun game to play to try to increase your bird skills, increase your birding by ear knowledge. And so definitely check that out if you're going to want to play some games. And it's one of those things that kind of a fun thing to do in the wintertime. Say, hey, it's snowy and cold outside, but hey, I'm thinking about these spring birds, and I kind of want a little sounds of spring. Maybe something to do on a snowy Saturday afternoon, to kind of get yourself in the mood for spring and time to come. So definitely check that out. Kind of a fun thing to play with. So any questions on using technology for birding? Any thoughts? Any questions?
This is Ellen Connor.
Yeah.
Not a question so much, Jim, but something we discovered is that if we're out using the Song Sleuth app, we have to make sure that everybody in the group isn't talking, because it'll also, it'll say, Eastern Meadowlark, human.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good point, Ellen. Thank you. And something else, if you are using voiceover on your phone, is to turn the voiceover speech way down, because I've had the problem where I've went to record and it hears voiceover talking and it says human, and I'm like, no, it's not a human, it's just voiceover. So yes, so you really want to try and record when there's not a lot of other background signs, be it be human or other, people made sounds, cars, planes, things and stuff. If you can really isolate the song and get as close to it as possible without disturbing the bird, obviously, it's really, you're going to get a much better identification. So thank you for that, Ellen. That's a really good point.
That's a wonderful
question about Larkwire.
Yeah.
Can you tell it I want, upper Midwest birds, or I want easy birds, or is it just random and you just take whatever it gives you?
I think there's 3 different levels. I think there's easy, medium, and hard. So I think there's different levels. I don't know that you can go by region. I don't know if that you might be able to, but I don't know that for sure. But I know you can do easy, difficult, and hard. So there's different levels you can try.
Yeah, because if it wants me to tell 6 different West Coast warblers apart, it just sounds frustrating.
Yeah, no, it's not that. Yeah, I think you can get some real basic. And the birds that I have heard on it have been birds in this area. So you're not gonna have that problem. So and it's a free app, so give it a try. Great, thank you guys for the questions, and enjoy using technology to enhance birding.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. That was very interesting.
Yeah, it's incredibly. It's amazing how much has changed technology-wise for birders in recent years. So there's just a lot out there that you can use to learn, help you learn. Obviously, the best thing is just getting outside and listening. But All right, so just to wrap up a bit, let me see. So I just want to emphasize 3 things before we head out. Just keep these in mind. Yeah, you're definitely not going to learn all these birds or many birds quickly. I would really focus on starting small, starting local, starting your backyard, just get familiar with the birds that are in your neighborhood and just work your way. The more you learn, the easier it will be to learn other birds, and just be patient with yourself. You know, it takes some time, but it's also really fun. It's just great experience to be out there focused on wildlife, focused on things that aren't stressful. It's a great way to decompress, I find, and just it's a wonderful pastime. And certainly using as many associations, the mnemonic devices, the mnemonic phrases. Keep in mind always where you were when you saw a bird, habitat, time of year. All those things will help you connect the sounds with the birds. And yeah, a reminder that the virtual field trip is May 6th or May 8th, Thursday and Saturday next week. And before you come to that, we're just asking that you do 1 or more, if you're interested, of the following. Record a sound, a bird sound you hear outside in your backyard or wherever you like to go. And if you have that ability to record on your phone or your iPad or something, or write or record a description of the bird sounds you hear. Just write sort of the way we were doing it in the small groups. You can write or record how you experience the bird sounds. For example, you know, what time of day it was, the weather, other sounds you were hearing, what things it made you feel, like how you felt hearing it. Was it joyful? Was it melancholy? Sort of like the common loon sound might be. Memories it brought up. Sometimes audio sounds can bring up memories from your youth and other times. And then anything else, you might want to describe a spark bird, a bird that really got you into birding. So if you can do 1 or more of the following, we'll share some of those next week during the virtual field trip.
You can also use the Song Sleuth if you want to try out Song Sleuth and record a song and identify a song using Song Sleuth as well. It's something else you can do. You want to do that, and write about it or record it.
So that's all we have for today. Thank you, everybody. I was super impressed by people's, the way you guys worked on breaking down the sounds in the small groups. I think it was really cool. I love these personalized mnemonics. They're the best.
Okay, thanks everybody for coming. And we'll be back next Saturday with more Birding by Ear. Thanks.